Good morning, everyone. We are currently working on checkpoint 3, disease in US history. So if you're behind at all, what I'm going to suggest that you do is you take a minute, make a list and see where you're at and try to do one thing a day to catch up. So if you're still working on checkpoint 1 material, or you're already behind in checkpoint in quarter 2 material, take a moment, make a list, chip away little by little at anything that you have overdue. Continue to work on the current material. So that's my strategy, and come and see me if you need help with that. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to take a look at what we're up to this week. And last week we talked about cities, immigration, population increase in our cities because of the Industrial Revolution. With population increase, you all know you get disease. Okay, so here we have, can we take a look at this now? We're going to be talking about the progressives this week. Who are the progressives? We're going to learn who they are. The progressive movement was the first major reform movement of the 20th century industrial America. It was a movement primarily of the urban middle class who sought government intervention in the industrial economy to improve the living and working conditions of the working class, many of whom were Eastern European immigrants. While many progressives were motivated by humanitarianism, some were frightened by the growing influence of the Socialist Party in Europe and the threat of the same influence coming to America. They saw assistance to the poor as a way to counteract the threat. So at this point, a socialist movement is taking place in Europe. We are looking at the late 18th century and the beginning of the 19th. And at this point, Europe is in a bit of a turmoil. And this will all lead up to World War I, which we will get to down the road. But this is brewing. And the United States is noticing this. And we're looking at our working class people who are struggling. And when people struggle, they look for an alternative. So the idea that perhaps American workers were going to consider socialism was pretty terrifying to some people. One of these things that came out of that is the progressive movement, which brought in moral reform and looked at the workforce and the conditions and the wages and the living conditions of our working class people. So who were these people who we would call progressives? They're women, evangelicals. These are church people, journalists, social workers, experts, professionals, politicians, conservatives, and civil rights activists. These are all people who came together in various ways, shapes, and forms to help the working poor. So what you're going to do here is you're going to watch this little 4-minute video that's going to explain the progressives. And then you have it all wrapped up in 120 seconds right here. So I'd like you to watch these 2 videos. This is going to give you a good idea of who the progressives are. And then you're going to go to activity 1, where you're making connections and inferences. And you're going to answer these 4 questions. What was the primary mission of the progressives? Why were the progressives against immigration? What people were included in the voting process during this period? What people were not included? And what did the 19th Amendment do? Okay, then we're going to look at some very bad workplace conditions. We're going to look at the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. This is a dreadful fire that happened in New York City, and it killed 148 people. Most of them were young girls working in a sewing factory. And here we're going to take a look at that factory. We're going to take a look at some of the conditions that were in there that led to this dreadful fire. And here we have a reading, short reading on the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. We're going to make connections. We're going to look at how the disaster-focused public attention on the growing exploitation of immigrant workers. So these are people who have just come to this country, grateful for any work they get, and will take low wages, will take long hours, will work under poor conditions because they have to. We're going to examine how the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire demonstrates very clearly what can happen when profits become more important than workers. Then we're going to do our checkpoint where once again we're making connections and inferences, and we're going to talk about how a picture is worth 1,000 words. So in checkpoint 1, you looked at the photographs of Jacob Riis. We're going to go back to those here, and I've put the link in here. You're going to click right on that just to refresh your memory. These are the photographs that brought to the general public, they brought it home to the general public how people were living, particularly children. Children were exploited. They worked long hours. They did not get fed. They did not have good, safe places to live. And remember, children back in the turn of the century had a much different life than children today. So this is your checkpoint for here, where you will write a 3 to 7 sentence response to the question, why is a photo just as powerful or even more powerful than reading about something? So this photo is only one of the photos that you can use in your response. When you click here, this is going to take you to review a book that was called How the Other Half Lives by Jacob Riis. And he brought home the actual living conditions. He showed them in photography and helped change the world, change the United States world, and bring attention to the needs of the working class. So that's our checkpoint 3. Okay. And don't forget, we have live class Tuesdays, 11 o'clock, Miss Rose's room. Alrighty. I will see you soon. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And don't forget, get your work done. Okay.